This is Paul Glumaz with General Welfare Presents. This is our weekly show, and today is the 29th of January, and we're in the middle of the impeachment process. It's becoming very wearisome and repetitive, and people are getting ill watching Adam Schiff. You know, they're getting the shifts, whatever it is. It's just repulsive to watch the guy. I mean, he's such a fraud, such a sophist. And but we are entering, but there's a reason for all of this. Okay, there's a reason for all of this. I mean, you're watching this thing, and you're seeing the U.S. Constitution being just shredded by the Democrats right now, by the House managers. I mean, you know, they're turning, as the Trump's defense has been laying out, they're turning issues of policy into impeachment issues, and and what's happening is if they're successful, as Alan Dershowitz lays out, essentially you no longer have a presidential system, you have a parliamentary system, because this will be the equivalent of a vote or no confidence. If they can do this, then any president is no longer a president as intended by our writers of the Constitution. We don't have a presidency anymore. We have an extension of a parliament, essentially, and the Congress will then be making policy, which they almost are already. They're passing bills to actually curtail the executive powers in diplomacy and everything. The Congress is in insurgent mode. There was an earlier time when, under Bush, when the presidency was in insurgent mode against the Congress, but now you have the Congress in an insurgent mode against the presidency. But there's a reason for all of this. And there's a reason why we are very close to war. There's a reason why we're very close to the banking system disintegrating. And there's a reason for all of this. And that's because you, watching this, are very privileged to be the witnesses of the end of an epoch. We're talking about an end of an epoch. No, we're not talking about the end of the age of Pisces and the beginning of the age of Aquarius. No, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the end of nations and the global order. No, we're not talking about it. We're talking about an end of an oligarchy that has run the world, the western part of the world, since the time of Babylon and before, and has had a continuous transmigration genetically, politically, financially, to the modern period. Not everyone, but there is a continuation. The Babylonians went to the Persians, went to Rome, went to Venice, the British Empire. There's a continuation of this imperial orientation, which is run through an oligarchy, which is run through institutions. And we're coming to the end, absolute end of the entire system of oligarchy. The entire system of money changing, which is an extension of an oligarchy. The use of money changing, essentially, of a monetary system to control governments, to control kings, to control princes, to control sovereign nations. Venice, Phoenicia, Rome, the money changers, the money lenders. You know, this is a time old. It's what Jesus Christ, you know, threw out of the temple, which is, you know, the money changers. You know, I mean, this is what temples were in the old days. They were where you put your wealth there for safekeeping, and it became the basis of money of the money lenders, the money changers. So that whole system, which has never gone away, despite the American Revolution, despite the Communist Revolution, the French Revolution, the Chinese Communist Revolution, you know, the Mexican Revolution was a real revolution. Despite all of that, we haven't changed fundamentally the nature of the global system of control of power to an oligarchy. And the problem is, essentially, humanity cannot continue to survive, okay, with this oligarchy. And there are fundamental reasons why. And that is, the oligarchy cannot continue to survive as an oligarchy if you have continuous scientific and technological progress. Because that changes the nature of your population, and it decreases the ability to control people and to keep them backward and to keep the wars going through exploiting the backwardness of the populations, controlling through backwardness, and then keeping wars going and keeping the vendettas going and so forth. But on the other hand, humanity can't continue to survive unless there's continuing scientific and technological progress. So the oligarchy has operated as not as a positive promoter of the development of nations, but has always existed as a parasite, as a parasite, as a tax, whether it's through financial speculation as a tax, or whether it's through taxing for militaries or as a tax, or whether it's an expropriation of the wealth of nations for their own purposes. The oligarchy has always existed as a tax, and the instruments through which they rule, the hangers-on, the flunkies, the bankers, the various agents, they have to be supported and rewarded, and that's another tax. So you have essentially a system of increasing financial and taxation, and their whole idea is to turn the taxing power of all these governments into an extension of their to make it theirs through debt slavery and through this financial speculative bubble and so forth and so on. But they can't continue to exist. So we're at the end of an epoch, and when I mean at the end of an epoch, when you wipe out this oligarchy in this coming period, there will be no more oligarchies. There will be nations, but not oligarchies. They know it, and they have a profound sense of this and that's why they lined up at Davos. Why did they line up at Davos with 190 millionaires behind 17-year-old Greta Thunberg, Al Gore, and this dysfunctional Prince Charles? Because they must stop scientific and technological progress. That's who they see as the primary enemy. The primary enemy is scientific and technological progress. That's the primary enemy. And when Donald Trump refused to sign on to the Paris Climate Change Accord, that was a declaration of war by Donald Trump on their policy. Their policy is coming down through every channel, through the media, through the bankers. Everything that they control is green. It's going green. You got to shut down to save the planet. You got to shut down carbon, fossil fuel burning, what have you. It's an all-out assault on economic development, an all-out assault on economic development. They did a very good job with Paul Volcker and his high interest rates in 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, and the International Monetary Fund conditionalities. They did an excellent job of shutting down economic development. But now, you have China moving, you have Russia moving, you have India moving forward, other countries, the Belt and Road. This is their all-out assault. This is their all-out assault. And they got every Democratic candidate totally going with this program. Even Tulsi Gabbard is going with it. Why? Because it's coming down from the entire system. It's coming down. They're shoving it down. They're shoving it down in France. They're shoving it down in Germany. They're shoving it down in Spain. They're trying to shove it down in Italy. And the European Union is trying to shove this down. Shut down fossil fuels. Tax the crap out of fossil fuels. Tax the crap out of gasoline consumption. They're shoving it down on the population. They want the population they want to break the population with this. And then you have the bankers, led by Mark Carney, who has gone from the Bank of England to the leading environmental financier, promoter of shifting investment away from the physical economy to these green projects, which are worthless. They're absolutely worthless. And you ask yourself, if you sit down and explain to somebody why solar and windmill have such a low energy flux density that they are virtually useless for modern industrial society, and you go through the math, you go through the actual physical reality of it, most people that you talk to, unless they have some experience as working in the workforce with, construction and blue collar workforce, which has a sense of reality about the physical nature of things, these people just, they will not get it. It's something as simple as that. They will go, oh well, it's too many people. Oh well, we don't need progress. Progress is what's hurting the planet. Or, one thing or another. Or nuclear power is really not feasible because we don't know what to do with the waste. And so on and so forth. And there's no problem solving, or shall we say consequential thinking being done. You have every Democratic candidate operating this way. You have to ask yourself, what happened? Because you don't have any consequential thinking. People have stopped thinking. And I did this in the last program. Associative reasoning, affective reasoning, emotions have replaced actual thinking things through in terms of consequences. They don't think through in consequences. I wonder how many of these people in our military-industrial complex who want to see the button pushed so we can win a nuclear war have thought through all of the aspects of what Russia has done recently that make it impossible to win a nuclear war. You have to ask yourself, are they at that level of dysfunction as the people who have bought into this whole idea that you got to get rid of everything but solar and wind and whatever, cow manure or geothermal or just, it's totally, where are these people's brains? You have to ask yourself, where is their mind? Where did it go? So we're at the end of an epoch. And I'm reminded of that period of geological history on our planet when the dinosaurs were at their apex. And then something happened and they were wiped out. And I suspect it was because they couldn't sustain the directionality that the biosphere and the planet had to go in order for it to survive. They couldn't sustain it. and they were wiped out, whether it was by some event or whatever. And out of that came a much more energetic creatures, animals. They were called mammals. Also, there was a transformation of the plant life, and also transformation of fish life to much more complex forms. So we are looking at the political historical equivalent of the dinosaurs, and they are crashing into humanity, and they are going to get wiped out at this point, and they are they're like, ripping everything apart in a crazy sort of way, and that's what the impeachment part is part of. That's what ISIS and all of these terrorist groups were all about. That's what this whole situation with the LBGT and the transgenders and identity politics. It's a complete tearing up of society, a tearing up of the very means by which a society reproduces itself, both in terms of families as well as productively, as well as physical. The green thing is fundamentally the same as the transgender thing. You're tearing up the reproductive process itself. You're tearing up the physical, economic reproductive process. You're tearing up the social reproductive process. Why? Because the world is overpopulated. The current levels of population of the planet require an ever-increasing scientific and technological orientation, and that must be stopped at all costs. Otherwise, these dinosaurs cannot survive. But they can't survive anyway. So that's the situation. In that kind of crazy situation, and we have and there are forces now emerging that are refusing to go along with this. In Italy, in Germany, you have the farmers going absolutely nuts, blocking the roads. At the same time that all these children are marching with Fridays for Future right into the middle of the farmers. It's totally. You have the yellow vest in France. Well, part of the whole yellow vest thing is anti-green. It's against the punitive taxes that are being. The green movement is giving the Macron the right, the right to put in. So it's very big. But you also have something that is also very disturbing to this oligarchy, in terms of what just went on in Russia. The oligarchy views Putin as a real problem because he's upset a lot of their their plans. And so, but Russia was not very stable. Well, because the Soviet Union collapsed and they were looted by the West, and but what happened with this reorganization that Putin has done is that the people who represent serious commitment to industrial technological development and eliminating poverty in Russia are now have the upper hand, as opposed to the people that used to be in the financial positions, who were more interested in Russia's participating in the global financial system. They didn't really care about the people. They were more care about financial solvency and paying your debts and the austerity on the population to make it look good before the IMF. Those people are not going to be around. Or if some of them are going to be around, they're going to be in a different position. So Putin is making this transition now away from the globalist system in terms of the internal economic development. That's not going over very big, and there's howls and screams like crazy about that. So everywhere in the world there's resistance building. Donald Trump had an event in New Jersey. 175 people applied for 175,000 people applied for the for a seat in a facility that only holds, 15,000, 10,000, 15,000, 18,000. I'm not sure of the exact figure. And I don't know if 100,000 total showed up. I mean, that's a lot of people trying to get in. That's a lot of people. being brought off the street, and then they've done polls. At the previous one in Milwaukee, where 57 of those who came were not Republican. Only 43% were Republican. The rest were independents and Democrats. And then perhaps as many as 20% have never voted before. And another 15% maybe only voted once before. So what's going on? This is not from the media. This is not Michael Bloomberg putting hundreds of millions of dollars of ads on TV. You can't turn around without having seen. Mike can do it. That's not getting people out in the streets. The media isn't getting the people out in the streets. What's getting the people out? What's the phenomena of people coming to a Trump rally in increasing numbers of people? What's the phenomena there? Something different is going on. And people who are experienced consultants in the field of politics know that if you get an email, it represents so many. If you get a written letter, it represents even more. And if you get somebody showing up at an event, it represents even more. So they're calculating the social dynamics behind 100,000, 175,000 people requesting and 100,000 people showing up. They're calculating what this is. It's phenomenal. What is going on? Well, there is no future with the oligarchs. There is no future in the green agenda. There is no future in the transgender, getting your kids at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to be thinking about what sex they want to be. There is no future for humanity in that. There's no future for anybody that wants a future. If you just want to live a life from where you are now to when you die, just in some kind of pleasure-seeking mode, well, and you didn't care about a future, that's one thing. And a lot of people don't care about a future because they didn't believe there was really a future. They just believed everybody was corrupt. There's nothing you can do. There is no future. You might as well forget about it and just deal with your personal life. But what kind of life is that? Are you just living to go to work and get enough money to pay the bills and maybe buy some pot and stay high? Is that all you're living for? Is that what that's what all this is about? There has to be something more. There has to be some meaning to all of this. So these people are looking at Trump as not the savior or anything like that, but they're looking at that as a reflection of an expression of their frustration with what they've been frustrated with for the last 20, 30 years. He's saying things in such a way that there is some hope somehow that if he survives, that hope will manifest itself in a future. And when he spoke at Davos in front of all this all-out oligarchical effort to shut down the human race, what did he do? He called them the pessimists of doom, of the apocalypse. And all they want to do is impose their will and control everything. And we can solve problems. And he referenced the Dome of Florence. He referenced going into space. He referenced nuclear power. He gave a speech about the future of humanity based upon an optimism of what human beings can do, using historical examples from the Renaissance. That was a direct attack on this oligarchy. Bullseye. And those people out there who are showing up at these rallies, this is only the beginning. Wait till you get in the middle of the election period. How many people are going to be showing up at these things in the middle of an election period? So they trot out John Bolton, and they're using the Bolton teaser mechanism. Well, he he has to testify, and all they want to do is drag it out. They just want to turn the population off. They want to so drown people in this garbage that they tune out. But so I have no idea where this is going. Now, in the middle of all this, Trump had this meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, with all the pro-Israel people and the evangelicals and everything, and he's talking about a Middle East peace, the agreement. This is the deal of the century, he calls it, right? And we're still analyzing it. But the way he posed it, it's not. There weren't any real specifics. It was basically left open for a process. And although the Palestinians have rejected it and the Arab League has rejected it, the Palestinian leader Abbas did say that there could be some kind of dialogue going through the quartet, which is Russia, the U.S., the UN, and the European Union. So there is room here for a discussion or a dialogue for a Middle East peace. So, and I say this in that Putin has now called for a meeting of the permanent members of the Security Council to actually begin creating the new security architecture. So already, this is for real. So now we come to this question of this epidemic that's coming out of China, this coronavirus epidemic. And in times like this, you are also marked by this kind of potential pandemic, which will force either chaos or will force the world to come together to defeat it. And that's the kind of thing that happens in periods like this, when you're at the end of an epoch. And you are at the end of an epoch. And it's an incredible moment in human history, in universal history. And you are participating in it, yet you don't really fully realize your power to participate in it and to be part of that transformation. The end of the dinosaurs, the end of the oligarchs, and the beginning of a much better human existence.
Common stock investments have helped to make our country prosperous and powerful. Owning a share in American industry is like owning a share in the future of our nation. But remember, John Q, there is a risk as well as an advantage in owning any kind of property. So get the facts before you put your money to work.